Buenos días. Qué bueno estar en su preciosa ciudad de Puebla. What I thought I would do today is really give an overview of where we are in this field that we call regenerative medicine, and just to give you a glimpse on some of the work that's been done in this area. This is actually a painting that hangs at the Countway Library at Harvard Medical School, and it shows the very first time an organ was ever transplanted in a patient. In the front, you see the surgeon getting the patient ready for the transplant. In the back room, you see the other surgeon retrieving the organ, which was a kidney. The very first organ was a kidney. And this happened back in 1954. Many challenges since then, but still many lives that have been saved. We're still dealing with a lot of problems in terms of organ rejection and organ shortage. So basically, one of the things that we are doing today is looking at the shortage of organs. And the problem with us is that every 30 seconds, a patient dies from diseases that could be treated with replacement organs. So basically, one of the things that we do, I don't think the slides are coming up. Oh, they are coming up, actually. Sorry, I'm just not seeing them. The public health crisis is extremely serious. And this is because there's just not enough organs to go around. And basically, that is why this field came forward, which is the field that we called regenerative medicine. And it's really not a new field. It basically got started back in the early 1930s. This is actually a textbook that was published back in 1938. And it's called The Culture of Organs. And you can see the two authors. The first author is actually Alexis Carrel. Like Joe Mary, that we saw in the slide before, he was a surgeon who was working on culturing organs. But I also want you to note his co-author. The co-author was Charles Lindbergh. That is the same Charles Lindbergh who flew across the Atlantic back in the 1920s. He actually spent the rest of his life working at the Rockefeller Institute in New York. So here we are now in this field, and basically we ask ourselves a simple question. Is it possible to regenerate our own organs? Well, the fact is we can. We can regenerate our own organs, but with a limited capacity. Other species can regenerate organs very well, like a salamander. For example, a salamander, if a limb is injured, it'll regrow within 2 weeks. It's an amazing thing in nature. So basically, if a salamander can do it, why can't we? Well, we can regenerate, as I mentioned, but with a limited potential. And regenerative medicine tries to take advantage of that potential in your body to help you regenerate. And we can do that by using either scaffolds alone. These are materials that look like a piece of your shirt or your blouse, a piece of textile material. And this is the way that we create these materials. This is like a cotton candy machine that you're seeing here. But instead of having cotton candy or sugar come out to create a cotton candy, what you see here are fibers of this material that are being put together in this tubular scaffold, and we now can create this material in the shape of a tube by using basically a modified cotton candy machine. And we can then use these scaffolds, these tubular scaffolds, to replace structures in patients, but only for limited distances. So for short distances where we can have just a patch, like for example in this organ that you see in this slide, on the top left you see a defective region in the center, and so we can just patch that up with this scaffold. And basically 6 months later, the organ fully regenerates, as you see here, just by using this scaffold or this material alone. The cells from the edge walk on that scaffold and bridge the gap to create the new organ that you see here. But this only works for very small distances. Or we can use cells alone. So basically what we do here is we take cells from a patient, and this is actually a picture showing what we do in the operating room. This is actually being done in several centers across the US, and it's already been done in Europe as well. Basically, this is a technology where they take a very small piece of skin from a patient, they take those cells out of that skin, and they place those cells in a spray gun, and they spray the cells on the burn. basically healing the patient. And this is being done right now at this moment in many centers throughout the world, creating skin using just cells from a patient. So we can use materials alone, like I showed you. We can use cells alone. But for more complex structures, we need both the cells and the materials. And basically what you do here is we basically take a very small piece of tissue from the patient. Let's say we are going to try to regenerate a urethra, which is a channel that connects the bladder to the outside of the body. We take a very small piece of tissue, less than half the size of a postage stamp. We then tease the cells apart. We grow and expand the cells outside the body in large quantities, and we then place those cells in a tubularized scaffold, again, the same type of textile material I just talked to you about. And all these materials, once inside the body, will degrade on their own. They will just go away, and the cells will take over and form the new tissue. Once the cells are placed on the scaffold, it is really cooked, if you will. It's get placed in an oven-like device. And then a few weeks later, you can take that structure and use it to replace that structure in a patient. And that's exactly what we did here. There is a patient who presented with a motor vehicle accident. They had a urethral injury, and you can see the major gap present in the urethra. Basically, you see the bladder, and you see this big gap between the bladder and the rest of the urethra. And we then engineered the urethra by taking a very small piece of tissue from the patient, growing the cells outside the body, placing those cells on the scaffold, cooking that scaffold with the cells, if you will, inserting that construct, that engineered tissue, back into the patient, and then you see the X-ray result on the right with the engineered organ. And we now have a long series of patients using these techniques. Thank you. We're using the same strategy for blood vessels. Basically what we do is we take, instead of using urethral cells, we use muscle cells, but a different kind of muscle cell. We then use these very fine lining cells which go inside the blood vessels, and we basically place these blood vessels in these bioreactors. And these bioreactors basically just pump away, and we exercise these blood vessels before we implant them. On the right, you see this X-ray of a blood vessel which was implanted in the neck region experimentally, basically a carotid artery, showing that it basically was working over time. So this is another tubular structure, a heart valve. And basically the way we do these structures is we start out with the most simple structures like skin. And those are the simplest because they're flat, mostly one cell type. The more complex organs are the tubular organs, like the urethras or the blood vessels that I just showed you, or the heart valves that we're creating right now experimentally. These heart valves have not yet been implanted into patients, but we're working with them to implant them. They're slightly more complex than flat structures because they're tubular. They have two cell types instead of one, but they're really allowing air or fluid to go through at a steady rate within that conduit. It's not as complex as hollow, viscous organs like the stomach or the bladder. These are much more complex, level 3 of complexity, because the structure is more complex and the cells are functionally more complex, and these organs also need to interact with other organs in the body for their complexity. And we've also engineered these and placed these into patients. And we implanted the first one of these organs back in 1998. Now, solid organs are the most complex, by far the most complex. So you have flat structures like skin, you have tubular structures like blood vessels and urethras, you have hollow, viscous organs like bladders and stomachs, but solid organs are by far the most complex because they need a lot of vascularity, a lot of blood vessels. So one of the strategies that we're using for these organs is we're taking discard organs like the liver that you see there, and we use very mild detergents to wash the cells away. And once we wash the cells away, we're left with something that looks like a liver that you see here. It feels like a liver, but it has no cells. But we're able to preserve that blood vessel tree inside the organ. And we then take, the concept here is we would take the patient's own cells, the blood vessel cells, feed them through that blood vessel system, take the liver cells, implant them in the surrounding area, and then we're able to create these miniature liver organoids right now that are able to function at a certain level. And this is one of the strategies we're using for solid organs. Another of the strategies that we're using for solid organs are these bioprinters. This is basically your typical desktop inkjet printer that you have at home, but instead of using ink, we're using cells. And basically we're printing cells and the gel at the same time, creating this two-dimensional, two-chambered heart that you see here. This is a miniature heart that you're going to see pop out of this printer, basically using just this desktop inkjet printer. And once it takes about 40 minutes to print. About 4 to 6 hours later, it actually starts to beat. This little heart structure starts beating. And then if you look at it under the microscope, you see these heart muscle cells beating together. Now at first, they beat separately, but then they start beating together, as you see here. And this is still, of course, at the basic stage of research. Another type of printer we're using is this printer we're using right now for the Department of Defense in the United States with a project. And basically, this is a printer that we're using just in the research arena, where you have a scanner that scans a burn area, and then the printer goes back and then lays down the cells right where they need it on the wound. Basically, this is how it works. Let me show you. This is a scanner. It scans the wound of the burn area, and then the scanner goes back, and then the printer comes in and fills in the cells in sheets. This is still in progress. Thank you. This is actually a, let's see where the next slide, there you go. Okay, this is another type of technology we're using now, much more sophisticated printers. This is a X-ray, a CT scan, and we use computerized morphometric imaging analysis to define what the organ should look like. And for example, right now we're targeting the kidneys in this particular slide, so we see three-dimensionally what the kidneys look like. And we then basically have this in a program, and we're able to print these structures using more sophisticated printers. And at this point, we've now been able to create these miniature kidney organs that are secreting dilute urine experimentally. And of course, the challenge for us is how to make these miniature kidneys larger so we can use them in patients someday in the future. And finally, I will leave you with this video clip. I'll leave you with this video clip of this patient that had this procedure done about 10 years ago, just to give you
I was really sick. I could barely get out of bed. I was missing school. It was just pretty much miserable. I couldn't, go out and play, basketball at recess without feeling like I was going to pass out when I got back inside. I felt so sick. I was facing basically a lifetime of dialysis, and I don't even like to think about what my life would be like if I was on that. So after the surgery, life got a lot better for me. I was able to do more things. I was able to wrestle in high school. I became the captain of the team, and that was great. I was able to be, the normal kid with my friends, and because they use my own cells to, build this bladder, it's gonna be with me. I got it for life, so I'm all set.
That's Lucas Masella. He's now 11 years out from having his engineered organ, and I had the pleasure of meeting him or seeing him for the very first time after 10 years just last year. I saw him when he had his surgery, and I had a chance to see Luke last year. He's doing well, but we still have many challenges ahead. We still have challenges in terms of regulatory challenges. We have challenges in terms of producing these organs and the cost. But at the end of the day, we know that these technologies have the potential to help patients. And for us, that is the promise of regenerative medicine, to make our patients better. Thank you for your attention today.